Hi, this is Dan Pastorini, and you're listening to The Grilling Truth.
Welcome to the Grilling Truth's NFL Legends Show, brought to you by Gridiron Mo, an interactive football app where you get to call what you think the offense or defense should do during a live NFL game and see what all other fans have called also. Check out Gridiron Mo at www.gridironmo.com. As always, for the Legends Show, I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. I want to welcome in our guest today, was a Dallas Cowboy during the 1980s. Help us welcome to the show, Tim Newsome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you on. Actually, we've got one of your old teammates, I think, is going to be on Friday, James Jeffcoat.
Yes. James and I played together for several years.
All right, so let's just go back to the beginning. When did you first fall in love with football?
My first time I fell in love with it probably was my sophomore year in college, believe it or not. Up until then, it was somewhat of a struggle for me, and I received one scholarship offer to play football, and that was to Winston-Salem State University. But my love was baseball. But it wasn't until my sophomore year that I actually fell in love with the sport.
All right, and you talked about being at Winston-Salem State. The teams were really successful when you were there, I think back-to-back undefeated seasons, regular seasons. You played for a legendary coach, Bill Hayes. What was your relationship like with Coach Hayes?
It was an excellent relationship. He was the kind of person that pushed me to limits that I didn't think I had. And so coming out of kind of a small town and then going to a small school, he enabled us to think big. And that's what he instilled in me. When I came out of high school, I was only like 6'2", 180 pounds, and then I left at 6'2", 240 pounds. So they bulked me up and kept my speed down to an acceptable level, so I was able to get drafted, and because of him, all of those things were possible.
All right, like we said, you played on back-to-back undefeated team. What were some of the highlights from your college career?
I think the biggest highlights was the fact that we went to the NCAA playoffs my junior year, and we beat a good football team in Cal Poly, St. Louis Obispo, and then we went up to the University in Delaware and lost heartbreaker by a large margin. I think it was like 35-0. But that experience enables a lot of us to have the confidence that we could play on another level. So I think that was a highlight.
So you talked about only one scholarship offer. When, during your college career, was it then that you thought you could possibly play in the NFL?
It actually wasn't until after my sophomore year that I thought I had a shot at it. And then when we duplicated an undefeated season, I was pretty sure that I could play at the next level. And, of course, my coaches kind of geared me towards being a candidate to play in the National Football League. So I began to think about it after my junior year.
All right. Now, draft day, a lot different now than it was in 1980. You want to tell our listeners, exactly what draft day was like for you getting drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1980?
Well, coming out of college, I was projected to go anywhere from 2 to 4 rounds, and I didn't go until the 6th round. And like everything else on draft day, most of the players selected in the first round were defensive players. I think Billy Sims was the first overall pick. He was a running back out of University of Oklahoma. The next running back taken was a man by the name of Earl Cooper out of Rice University. He was taken by the San Francisco 49ers, and everybody else kind of slid in through the lower rounds. So I didn't go until the 6th. And in those days, the draft really wasn't televised, so you kind of had to listen to or read the newspaper or go through some sort of wire service to figure out who was being taken. So it was a very stressful time because you just didn't know where you were going to go. And, of course, it was late that evening on the 6th round. In those days, they only had it on 2 days. So I went the first day around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
All right, now you get drafted by the Cowboys. What was that like? I mean, that's America's team at the time, and Jerry Jones still claims it is. We don't know, though, because Jerry's kind of messing things up there. But, what was it like just to go to a veteran team like that?
Well, it was exciting because I did not think I would have the opportunity to go to a team that I had kind of targeted coming out of college as a team that I would like to play for. Of course, they were a perennial playoff power, and they had just gone to the Super Bowl a year or so before, and they had a good nucleus of running backs. So it was kind of a bittersweet moment. On the one hand, I was excited to have been drafted by them, and on the other hand, I said, okay, now how am I going to make this team? So those are the two kind of contrasts that I had going through my mind. As it worked out, I was able to make the team and played for quite a while.
All right, now you get to that team. You played for one of the legendary coaches in NFL history, Tom Landry. You want to tell us a little bit about Tom?
Well, he was a very, very good coach. He played defense for the New York Giants in the days of the fact that he and Vince Lombardi were on the same staff there, but he played defense, and then he coached defense with the New York Giants, and he was an excellent offensive mind. He understood defenses very well because he played that side of the football, but more importantly, he was a very strict disciplinarian, but he was hard, but he was fair. He was a very fair person when it comes to the discipline, when it comes to trying to figure out who was going to start and who wasn't. And in that regard, that's one of the things that I enjoyed about him as a player who played for him.
All right, now, when you were with the Cowboys, we talked about how they were a veteran team. I mean, you had guys like Tony Dorsett, Robert Newhouse in the backfield. Was there anybody that kind of took you under their wing when you got to Dallas?
Robert Newhouse. I had just completed my second year. I was going into my third year, and I was struggling at the fullback position because in college I was a tailback. And he kind of looked at me one day and started laughing. He said, if you keep playing like that, I'm going to stay around for a few more years, and I'm going to show you how you can take my job. And he was serious. And so I would come up to his room every night to learn the nuances of the fullback position because it was vastly different than anything I had seen at Winston-Salem State University. And so he taught me the position and taught me the patience of playing the fullback position. So he was the one that really gave me the confidence that I needed to make it in the National Football League. And, of course, he died a few years ago at a young age, but I miss him dearly. But he was a great person who taught me a lot about the game of football.
All right. Now, one of the most impressive things when I was doing the research about you that I read was about how you realized as a player you wouldn't play forever. You want to tell our listeners what you did to prepare for the day you would retire while you were still playing football?
Well, it's interesting. When I graduated from Winston-Salem State University, I had a degree in business administration and a minor in computer science. And one of the things I told Gil Brandt, who was the player personnel director, is that I wanted to work in the off season. And so he said, okay, he said, let us help you do that. He said, as long as it doesn't interfere with football, you can do it. And so I made certain that I found some place to go that would allow me to not only work in the computer field, but also allow me to go to the practice facility every day and train. So I had the best of both worlds. And one of the things I found out about professional football is that in the off season, there's no spring practice. Today they have OTAs, but it was very kind of a loosely based function of workouts that, in college there's spring practice and there's a lot of structure. In the National Football League, the structure is there, but, you don't go to classes or anything of that nature, so you're only there for maybe 2-3 hours a day, and then the rest of the day is yours. So I decided to take advantage of it and work for a company that sold computer software to banks, and so I did that for 9 years.
Yeah, because I read also, you were huge on the education. Your mother, I think, was your catalyst for that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. My mother was a history teacher, and so a lot of what I learned and the way in which I approached the academics was based on how she instilled in me the values of education, and at the same time, I could probably do both education and athletics. And so when I got to Winston-Salem State University, one of the things I did not want to do was just have a major just for the sake of going to college and keeping a scholarship. I wanted to push myself to the limit, and, naturally it was difficult to do, but I had to manage my time wisely. So having her as that catalyst, and she was my counsel, she didn't know anything about football, but I could always ask her football-related questions from a psychological perspective. And so she would always give me real good answers, and she never told me what I wanted to hear, but she told me the truth. And that really shaped me going forward.
All right. Now, with the Cowboys, they were really successful when you first got there. They, 80, 81, 82, make it to the championship games. You want to talk a little bit about your playoff experiences? I know you played in some really memorable games, like the 81 championship game against the Niners.
Well, that one's the one that hurt. And to this day, I have never seen that game on tape. NFL Network will show it every now and then, and as soon as I see it, I walk out of the room. That was our best chance of going to a Super Bowl, and we had a real good nucleus of talent that year, and we just did not we just couldn't, win that game that day. Joe Montana orchestrated a great drive that catapulted him into that victory, but that was the one that I think we missed the most. Of course, we lost to Philadelphia my rookie year. That was pretty decisive on their end that they beat us, and then we went to San Francisco, and, of course, that third year we played the Washington Redskins, and that was a strike-shortened year, and we just never could get on track. And after that, we would come out of the blocks real fast and then just fizzle at the end, so we just never was able to actually get back into the championship game and get to a Super Bowl during the time I played.
All right, now you talk about 1982 being a strike-shortened year. I mean, what were your strike experiences?
It's kind of interesting. That first strike, and I experienced 82 and 87. That first year was more or less about trying to get benefits for players who came before us, and the other strategic issue was to try to get second opinions on injuries that we sustained. And so a lot of it had to do with that. And then, of course, we played a few games and went on strike, and then all of a sudden we were able to reach an agreement that no one really liked. But we went back to work, and it stayed that way until 87, so we struck again. But, it's never a fun time when you have a situation where you got to play football and then there's a business side to it. And that was very difficult.
Yeah, and you talked about 87. You went through both. What were some of the differences between the two strikes?
Well, obviously in 87, they decided to incorporate replacement players in the event that we struck. And then when we walked out, that's exactly what they did. All of the rookies and young players they had in camp, they would re-sign them and say, okay, if the current players strike, we want you guys to come back and play football. And so that's what happened. And in that situation, we went back to work without an agreement, and we stayed without an agreement until the early 90s when a judge ineffectively said, you guys need to come to an agreement, and if you don't, I'll make the decision for, both of you, and neither one of you will like it. And then, so, of course, there was an agreement in place, and it basically has withstood the test of time to this day.
All right, now, you've had some really good seasons, especially 1984, 85. I mean, was it ever frustrating to be stuck behind one of the greatest running backs that ever lived, Tony Dorsett? And then they signed Herschel Walker, I think, in 1986 on top of it.
Well, what was interesting about playing behind Tony is that I never started a football game while I backed him up, which was remarkable because he was extremely durable. And I, saw him get hit a lot. I saw him get knocked out of games and thinking he's not going to come back in, but yet he would go back in and play. And it's just remarkable that I never got to start a football game while he was the tailback. And that's the most glaring tribute to him as a football player, is the fact that he was so durable. And so I never got a chance to really run the football like I had hoped because he was just a very durable player.
Well, I mean, looking back at your career, what is the thing you want people to remember about your career the most?
Well, I did everything they asked me to do. I came out of college as a runner. They taught me how to block, and they taught me how to catch football passes and run great routes. And the two things that I did the least of in college, I did very well at the pro level. But I had the size to do the things that I did. So when they needed someone to run short yardage plays, I did that. When they wanted someone to block short yardage plays, I did that. when they wanted